Today, the committee will again take up the issue of housing finance reform. At the committee's last hearing, we heard from Treasury Secretary Geithner about the need for reform. Secretary Geithner noted that our housing market is now entirely dependent on government support. He warned that private capital will not return until we fix the problems in our private mortgage market. He also told the committee that Congress should therefore pass housing finance reform during this Congress. I agree with Secretary Geithner that housing finance reform is overdue and should be promptly addressed. Chairman Johnson has also stated that this is one of his highest priorities. However, I also believe that before Congress can consider legislation, this committee needs to do its homework. The committee needs, I believe, to thoroughly examine federal housing policy and identify the problems with our current system. Accordingly, I believe this hearing is premature at the moment. Before we discuss solutions, I think on this committee we should first clearly identify the problems we're trying to solve. Without that examination, a thorough examination, I fear that the committee will again yield to the temptation of picking a solution before it has accurately described the problem. I think legislation should be driven by facts, not by predetermined outcomes. I would propose that the committee establish a formal process for considering housing finance reform. This process, I believe, should include a series of hearings that are preceded by comprehensive staff work. First, the committee should hold a series of investigative hearings to examine federal housing policy and our housing finance system. These hearings would seek to determine what aspects of our system have worked well and should be retained, as well as which aspects should be reformed or discarded. As part of these hearings, I believe the Banking Committee would also examine what caused the failures of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. We haven't done that thoroughly yet. The committee would next gather the proposals for reforming our housing finance system from a wide variety of interested parties across industry, academia, and the public. I also believe the Banking Committee should then commence a second series of hearings examining the cost and the benefits of these proposals, directly applying the lessons learned from our first round of hearings. And once the Banking Committee has identified the problems and researched the potential solutions, we will then be ready for the final phase, which would be legislating. I understand that this process would be time-consuming and require a great deal of effort, but that's what this committee should be about. I do not believe that the committee has much choice. It's the only way to produce legislation on a subject as complex and important as housing finance. This process would help educate us on the issues so that we can make informed decisions here in the committee and in Congress. It would also ensure that any legislation passed is effective and has the fewest unintended consequences. In addition, this process would offer the best chance of forging a bipartisan consensus on how we should proceed. Unfortunately, the committee failed to follow this course with the Dodd-Frank legislation, and the result was partisan legislation that's full of technical problems that has had serious adverse unintended consequences. I hope we do not here repeat this mistake with housing finance reform. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Before I introduce our witnesses, would other members like to make brief opening statements? I will also